moving out of the narcissistic parent's home for scapegoats. Well, Rick was another anonymized fictional client who grew up as the scapegoat in a family dominated by a narcissistic mother. He was roundly criticized and yelled at on a daily basis for not doing chores around the house in a responsible enough way, or not showing enough deference to his mother in one way or another, or wanting to see his friends outside the family. It was a very difficult upbringing. And towards the end of his high school, Rick had to winnow his life down to working extremely hard in school and doing his chores around the house just to kind of avoid the worst sort of damage or punishment his mother might inflict on him. He harbored the secret wish to escape the torment of his home and his mother by going to college, and around May of his senior year of high school, he was accepted into a college and began to make plans to live a life that felt a lot less like the prison he was in. And he was in for a terrible surprise, however. From the day he was accepted into college until the end of the summer when he left for it, his mother ratcheted up her attacks to an almost unbearable degree at him. And Rick found himself developing even more intense self-criticism when he was alone with his thoughts, so that by the time he got to go to college, he was so ridden with anxiety over failing his courses, not being able to make friends, and worrying about being a failure, that he found it almost impossible to concentrate and do what would otherwise come naturally to him, to get along well with others and have friends and do well in his classes. Well, do you have an experience similar to Rick when it came time to leave the home of your narcissistic parent? And if so, then I hope you'll find today's video helpful, because one of the most hopeful yet psychologically and emotionally, if not physically, dangerous times for the scapegoat child of the narcissistic parent is when it's time to move out of that narcissistic parent's home. You know, whether it's to leave for college at age 18, at least in the United States, leave for the armed forces or a job, and say your own place to stay or whatever it may be. These moments signify an act of independence by the scapegoat child that may prove extremely threatening to the narcissistic parent, and I'll describe how and why. In today's video, I'm going to dig into the psychological necessity for the narcissistic parent to feel dominant and in control of the scapegoat child. Then I'm going to explain how the narcissistic parent acts coercively to enforce the scapegoat child's submission to their efforts at control. And then I'm going to discuss the psychological and emotional dangers that are often faced by the scapegoat child or adolescent when they attempt to move out. And if you watch until the end, I'll offer a strategy and resource to protect yourself when moving out from under a narcissistic parent's control, which very much is symbolized when moving out of their house. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. This form of abuse can leave us feeling lost and estranged from our very sense of who we are. And in individual therapy and through my online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse, I try to offer a map that affords some clarity in finding one's way back to the quality of life that you may know you deserve, but that's felt prevented in the course of narcissistic abuse. And of course, each survivor must travel this path themselves, but I think a map can be tremendously helpful in that journey. And there are three key features on this map that I like to refer to as the 3 pillars to recovery. The first pillar is making sense of what happened, so you get to know it was not your fault. The second pillar is gaining emotional, psychological, sometimes physical distance from the narcissistic abuser. And the third pillar is learning to live in defiance of the narcissist's rules. And again, you can't do this in a vacuum. It's incredibly important to find communities of people who can get, validate, and support you on this path. Today's video falls under the pillar number 2 of gaining distance from the narcissistic abuser. All my videos are organized into one of those 3 pillars in playlists, and I'd encourage you to check out the playlist section if that's something of interest to you. And if you were a scapegoat survivor of a narcissistic parent or partner, then I'd encourage you to check out my free ebook on the topic. It's called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as the Scapegoat, and it goes into other important aspects of what it's like to be in the shoes of the scapegoat child or partner facing a narcissistic abuser. from self-limiting beliefs about yourself that you have to adopt in order to survive, to why the narcissistic personality is so geared to put those closest to them down. I think this ebook can help you realize or contribute to realizing how none of this abuse was your fault, but was rather the product of the narcissist's own psychological and emotional problems or pathology. And you can find the link to the ebook in the description box below or by clicking here. So let's get into it. The narcissistic parent's psychological need to dominate the scapegoat child. A narcissistic parent has forged a frankly whack solution to the problem of their feelings of deep worthlessness. In essence, they've denied these feelings, insisted on their opposite so that they're in fact worth more than others, and feel entitled to coercively use or exploit others to support this sort of artificial or fashioned superiority. And their artificially inflated self-worth is a fragile one that offers them temporary relief from the feelings of worthlessness, powerlessness, and shame that they're constantly trying to evade within themselves. But however, the cost to those close to them is that they're forced to collude with the narcissist's efforts to sort of prop themselves up in these ways. And any action from someone else which doesn't do this, it doesn't contribute to them being propped up, will often result in sort of breakthrough feelings of worthlessness for the narcissist, who will often respond by attacking that other person for, in essence, failing to prop them up. In essence, failing to do what the narcissist believes they're entitled to. I remember a rhyme that kids would say when I was in like first grade or something, and it went like this. I'm the boss, your applesauce. Understand, rubber band? And I think we'd say it to each other on the bus. Liked it because it rhymed. But it's always stuck with me for one reason or another. And, granted, it's not exactly like a bar from a diss track in rap today, but it did, I think, perfectly encapsulate the narcissistic parent's attitude towards a scapegoat child. That in order for that parent to feel superior, then they need to really feel like the boss of that child. So regarding you as being applesauce, or regarding that child as being applesauce, I think, reflects how the parent implicitly devalues the child to assume the position of boss. And same goes with calling the other rubber band. I mean, it's a playful kind of quasi-insult in the rhyme, but really gets at the heart, I think, of the narcissist's need to first devalue the others, then assume a position of dominance over those others, and particularly for the child in the position of scapegoat to that narcissistic parent. How the narcissistic parent coerces a scapegoat child to submit to the parent's control. So the narcissistic parent perceives the scapegoat child to be, in essence, a psychological extension of themselves. So what that means is, just as we might move our fingers if we choose, the narcissistic parent can believe it's the child's inherent duty to obey the parent's command in the same way. Like the narcissistic parent could think, I want you to the child to close that door. They just need to kind of like state it, or even sometimes think it, and feel entitled that that child goes and does that without zero complaint, if anything, just appreciation maybe for being told what to do. So if the child hesitates or shows any outward protest or disgruntledness at being told what to do like this, the parent will likely see this as outrageous, a sign of being ingrateful and just an unforgivable betrayal. So any effort by the scapegoat child to be in control of themselves and not under the narcissistic parent's control will be grounds for extremely punitive attack by that parent. Those attacks can include narcissistic rage, systematic efforts to undermine the child's good standing to others in and outside the family, and even overt rejection can all kind of be directed towards a scapegoat child who, in essence, has dared to live from the dictates of their own will rather than the narcissistic parent's will. So what are the dangers of moving out for the scapegoat child or adolescent? Well, given how necessary it is for the narcissistic parent to find themselves in charge of the scapegoat child, it's no surprise that it can be extremely dangerous for that child or adolescent to eventually leave the home. Whether it's to go to college, the armed forces, marriage, or to just live on one's own, these particular points in life can bring the narcissistic parent face to face with their inability to kind of comprehensively control the scapegoat adolescent. The narcissist will typically try to devalue someone whom they cannot control, and that may happen intensely in the lead up to the departure of the scapegoat adolescent from the home, just as it did for Rick in the example at the start of the video. So I think it's therefore an act of great courage for the scapegoat adolescent to move out in the face of such malevolence from the narcissistic parent. And I want to make this video to hopefully inform adolescents who are currently in this situation, or adults who see an adolescent who's in this situation, to be aware of the dangers of the narcissistic parent's increased attacks when that adolescent is planning to leave home. And my hope is that this awareness may help such children to identify how the parent is acting, why the parent is doing this, and how that adolescent might protect themselves from believing the malicious attacks being plied against them by the narcissistic parent. I think this situation is similar to what they tell survivors of domestic abuse, physical abuse, that the greatest risk of being killed occurs when the victim leaves the abuser. And that's because such acts of leaving fly in the face of the narcissistic abuser's requirement to feel in control of the victim, and can inspire even murderous levels of narcissistic rage to restore the abuser's sense of control over that victim. So how can you or an adolescent protect oneself when moving out from under a narcissistic parent's control? I think that the most important tactic when leaving the home of a narcissistically abusive parent is to find connections to safe others whom you can confide in and feel support from. I think it's very important to experience others feeling happy with you exercising your independence to counter the narcissistic parent's accusations that you're defective for wanting to leave. And in addition, if you are worried about your physical safety as you transition out of the narcissistic parent's home, these other people may be able to offer you protection or places to go. In short, the narcissistic abuser preys upon the scapegoat adolescent's isolation from others so that only the parent has a say on how that adolescent feels about himself or herself. And if you're in this position and can find alternative sources of self-worth in other good or safe relationships, then the narcissistic parent will lose a great deal of power or control over you. Well, thank you for watching this week. I hope you found it useful, whether you're in the process of leaving home of a narcissistic abuser or you know someone in your life who is. That the key here is really to secure your connections to good, safe others, to protect yourself in this very important passage. And again, thank you, of course, for your continued engagement with this channel and for your comments. They're just so thoughtful, I think brave, and valuable to be able to read each week. So with that said, I look forward to posting again next week. Take care.